Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker, and podcast host, and each week I explore with men and women the many ways they have reinvented their lives after life changes, big and small, or simply the feeling that life is asking something more or new of them. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Francis Rodino. Francis is an AI growth architect and author who turns messy CRM and sales processes into predictable demand generation systems for service and operational businesses. So, Francis, welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Lucy.
Well, Francis, I always start by asking people what their childhood was like. Where did everything start for you? So where were you brought up? What kind of child were you? And was there anything you really wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, I was born in New York City and grew up just outside New York City in a little suburb town called Bergen County. Coming from an immigrant family, Italian and Romanian, my dad got a job back in Italy when I was around 10 years old, and he uprooted everyone. Lots of people just emigrate to the States for a better life. But after a while, we actually emigrated back to Italy, where I went to a British school at first and then an American school second, learned Italian. So I speak fluent Italian, and I came to London around 18 or 19 to study at uni, contemporary media practice at the University of Westminster. So I've really had three different parts of my life, I think, just upbringings, and I'm a real cultural mix of experiences, world experiences, but also like culturally and ethnically. So I guess for a long time, I really had an identity crisis. Like when someone would ask me, where are you from? I wouldn't know what to say because it would come out with some convoluted answer, right? That no one would really understand anyway. So it was a little bit lonely in that respect.
It does sound complicated. It actually sounds as if you have, with all the moving, it sounds as if you had like 2 or 3 reinventions before you got to kind of adulthood.
Yeah, maybe. And, the reinventions just keep coming. They don't stop.
That's what I want to talk about. So you came to London, and you studied, and then what happened? Presumably that was 3 years or something of your.
Yeah, I got my degree at University of Westminster. It was at a time where there was the dot-com boom and businesses were going online. They didn't have websites and they were creating the first e-commerce experience. That was always exciting for me to be part of that. And I majored in digital imaging and interactive media. So we were building out the first websites that look pretty embarrassing if you look back on how they looked. And, the digital animations using programs like Director on Mac, stuff like that. So I was immersed into creative arts.
Interesting. So when you finished your degree, what did you do for work? Where did you go next?
Well, my first job actually was back in Italy. I went back after my degree. I got a job at Mediaset, which at the time was Berlusconi's 3 private channels. And I worked for the Daily News, right? So as a video editor. So I worked side by side journalists who would go out and film content and create their packages, and I would be sitting there in the Avid digital suite, and I would work with them to bring those packages to the news 2 times a day, and it was a really interesting experience. Sometimes could be a bit heated, because it's very time-based. You need to get your content out in real time by a certain time. So yeah, I learned a lot, but ultimately living and working in Italy at that time, I didn't feel it. It didn't, I missed the UK. I missed more of that, say, go-getting entrepreneurial spirit that you have in London. And there was no comparison at the time with the industries and startups and opportunities that were here in London. So I moved back to London, and my first, I would say, like serious job that is congruent with what I do today was working at a digital agency called Razorfish, which at its time were the biggest digital agency in the world. And they were gobbling up all these smaller little agencies. It was very famous, very well known within digital and advertising circles. Ultimately, Razorfish went bust, went from being the biggest in the world to nothing, closing all its doors and going bust, just like so many businesses closed during the dot-com boom, because all of these sites and products and services didn't necessarily have proven business models underneath them. So that bubble burst, but it was great to be a part of it. I worked on NatWest's first e-commerce bank, built it from the ground up. I worked on the brand transition from British Petroleum to Beyond Petroleum, the Helix, which we see now today, BP, going from the perception of a oily, dirty oil business and gas business to a eco-friendly brand. Whether they've done that in any serious way remains to be seen, but that's the perception of the brand. So I was always involved in online content, online products, creation of digital assets. Before a stint at the BBC, where I then joined their social media team to help Top Gear reach its first 10 million followers on Facebook, and Doctor Who and BBC Earth and Blue Planet and BBC Good Food Guide, all these other BBC worldwide brands. My job was to help monetize them outside of the UK.
Sounds really, really fun. It sounds like well, I kind of feel you reinvented yourself from being an Italian media person to being a British or international. Presumably you were changing languages as well, which seems to me quite an important part of a reinvention, because you don't just talk another language, you think another language as well. You're almost a different person when you're in a different language zone. Did that happen to you?
Well, my mother tongue was always English. I was born speaking English. So I think I always thought in English, and Italian was a second language to me, although I speak it fairly fluently. But I guess I always felt a little bit of an outsider in Italy, even working there and living 10 years there. It's all in my head, right? But I felt like I didn't quite belong because of my background, and it was a bit different. It wasn't like other Italian kids and other Italian adults who had their well-established backgrounds and their families and their way. Italy is I would say that, love it or not, Italy is a culture. The Italian culture is one that is very set in their ways. They know what they like, and they don't stray from the formula for whatever reason. Maybe that's changed a little bit as Italy's evolved. In Milan, where I lived, has really grown it up a lot into this very cosmopolitan, forward-thinking town. But at that time, it wasn't necessarily. So I think in many instances, I did feel like a bit of a lone ranger.
And where were your family back in Italy at this point?
Yeah, family lived in Italy, in Milan.
Right. Okay, so let's hop back to the BBC. So how long were you at the BBC working on all these iconic programs?
BBC was probably around 5 to 6 years at that time. Then I got myself a job at AOL Europe, where AOL was still a thing, believe it or not, and they were still the third largest content platform. I think, Google was first, Yahoo was second, and AOL was third in the UK, and I'm pretty sure it's not even on the top 10 at the moment, but it was fairly big at that time, and their business model was selling as much advertising space as you possibly could and creating content for all of their different verticals from music, film, finance, sport. And so I was involved in those digital teams that created all of that stuff. And then they transitioned, they were selling off their internet access company to TalkTalk, which is still now around. TalkTalk is a internet provider. So yeah, I was there about another 5, 6 years as well.
Did your roles within each of these different organizations, did your roles transition as technology developed?
Yes. Yes is the short answer. I would say every role has been different, but builds on the last. Right. And so as I got more senior, I started managing more teams and guiding team members along to get shit done. I was always a get shit done person. I think one of my strengths in my career is that I always found a way to just problem solve within business and even my corporate career. And I think that was a good quality to have, that people wanted me on their team because they knew that things would happen. But I didn't necessarily like to play corporate politics. And as I got more senior and more experienced, and essentially the job became more about playing corporate politics than getting shit done. So I was always a little bit torn because, hand on heart, I'm a creative. That's where I come from. I make things, right? I make things. I bring things to life. Music was and still is a huge part of my life. Playing the cello since I was little, and then I went on to write music and record music, and I made an album. I crowdsourced $50,000 online and built an international fan base and launched my album back in 2009, and since also made music. And so I guess I've always had a bit of a yin and yang relationship with work because, sorry, not with work, with entrepreneurship, because I love to do the doing and the making. Like, I like to be the chef in the kitchen with their hands dirty in the ingredients and making things. But increasingly, I've learned that unless you're going to be a chef to run a business, actually, you need to detach yourself from that a lot and look at other areas. So that was always an interesting push and pull for me.
I really relate to that because I always saw myself initially as somebody who was going to be a writer and maybe an actor and a creative. And then I think if it turns out that you are actually quite good at the business side of things as well, it kind of almost makes you feel that you're not doing what you should be doing. And that I think you have to change your mindset and believe that business and the other parts of it are also creative, even though they're not kind of like arts creative. They are still creative, and then you can resolve that inner conflict to some extent. But that's fascinating, Francis. So what happened then? I'm assuming that you left AOL at some point, and if so, why?
Well, AOL was going through a pretty confusing time as it tried to reinvent itself for the modern era, where there was so many more competitors coming on with the content marketing and the branded content and the advertising, and also with the internet access platform. It didn't really have a place anymore. Ultimately, business was dwindling for AOL. So they were having rounds of redundancies. I wasn't made redundant, but I remember my bosses were made redundant. And I remember that I was stuck in this big corporation with no one to report to and no teams. And I completely fell through the net. And for a whole year, I had no manager, no one looking after me, no one asking me what I was doing or what to do. And, it's one of those strange situations. I've tried a few times to alert people like, hey, here I am. I'd like to help. But, the business is just going on with their things. But ultimately, I left AOL after that and found another job at an agency called Drum. So Drum are part of Omnicom Media Group, and they're a big branded content agency. They create not just commercials, but they associate brands to content. They create programmatic for TV, film, and radio and online. And I really had a great opportunity to work on some big global brands like Disney, PlayStation. I worked on the Olympics campaign, on Sainsbury's, editorials, and driving people to their websites. And it really was a great experience getting exposure to, these big brands and brainstorming different ways to market, right? Which are not your traditional, let's just throw money at ads, but how can we incorporate what we do and align it with relevant initiatives that are going on in the world? So I was a digital content strategist at Drum.
And what did that involve you doing on a day-to-day basis? I mean, having had this whole year of being sort of unmanaged and lost in AOL, it must have been like a reinvention to kind of suddenly come into somewhere with a lot more structure and with a specific role.
Well, I would say structure, no way. I don't think that in any job, in any organization I've ever had, there was ever anything remotely close to structure at all. It's all about, I think good management creates structure, and good management is not easy to find. I don't actually, hand on heart, I can't say I've ever been in an environment with like good management, meaning frameworks, accountability, consistency, leadership. No, in the corporate world, most of the time, my experience is just you just turn up and have to figure it out. I remember my first 6 months at Drum, nobody onboarded me. No one told me what to do. I would literally just came in on day one, thrilled to get the job, but I'd never been a digital content strategist specifically. I mean, I've done a lot of that. I'm a creative person and can do it, but there was no playbook. No one gave me a guide and said, well, this is what you do. And for the first 6 months, I remember I was really nervous because I just had no idea what I was doing, but I followed along and I learned the trade just by doing and being exposed to the teams working on things. And obviously there was more senior people that really had been doing stuff like this a long time. But what it entails is, we were thrown briefs every single day. Citroën has a new car launch. They want to showcase their vehicles and fleet, and they have a budget of 10 million for branded content to do this and this and this. And we then have to actually, this is pre-ChatGPT and deep research, we have to actually go and do the work. So before we had AI, they would hire brains like mine to actually go and do that work of kind of figuring out what are the insights? What can we deduce from the way people are, from the target market of these brands? What is the cultural relevance to the brand and what it is they're trying to promote, and kind of just make sense of it all and bring it out, bring it to light, and then use those insights to spark the creative team to generate content and ideas. And yeah, before AI, it was us. People were actually having to think about it. It sounds strange now because we're so used to just going into Claude and going, well, research this topic for me. Tell me what I should know about X. And, the more we use these tools, in a sense, I think we're kind of also losing the muscle to think for ourselves.
I think that's happened so quickly, really. I mean, I'd say probably of people just using it regularly and by default has been the last 2, maybe 3 years. But before that, it was all human brains for decades and centuries. So in your In your work now, in your experience, do you actually feel that there is a loss? But do you feel that the creative process loses something when you outsource that original, that beginning bit where you have to find the knowledge and the
Well, I think used properly, this can be mitigated. But at the same time, if you just delegate the thinking to AI, your output risks being the same as everyone else's, right? That's part of the AI slog. And even if there's good AI slog, even if there's posts which are almost passable or content that's almost passable, I presume that if you dive deeper, you find maybe you've lost a little bit of the life experience of the person that's creating that content. So in marketing, I would say that yes, AI can help you create things faster, but it can also help you miss the mark faster as well. And you can be very good at, you can dial in your prompting and your instructions, but you still have the reason we can use AI to create a better output most likely is because we have a certain amount of life experience, and we as professionals kind of know the difference between something that is right and something that isn't quite right, because I've spent an hour trying to get Claude to write something that doesn't sound like AI slog. It's not easy to do. And yeah, I think we are losing a little bit of our ability, that muscle. But having said that, it is what it is. And look, we used to need a calculator, right, to do maths. And it was a great thing to learn algebra and trigonometry and all of these things in school. I think it's still a good thing to know that they exist, but do we use them every day? No. And are we lost those skills? Many of us have. So I'm hopeful that we'll just reapply our brain power into maybe more important things,
Yeah,
and it will change.
that's a positive way to look at it. So that was your next phase then, being in this agency. And how long did you stay there, and what happened next? I know at some point we're going to say, and you decided you'd start your own business, but when did?
Actually, there was one more role. I was a global head of digital at a $3 billion data company that spun off from Thomson Reuters called Clarivate Analytics. I was 2 years there before becoming an entrepreneur, and that was the job that essentially spearheaded my change because, I won't get into the specifics about the corporate environment, but it made me realize that life is short and there's so much more potential that I felt like I could offer than working in an office for someone else. And I wanted to have the chance, at least before I got too old and, on my deathbed, to say, look, did you ever give entrepreneurship a go? The answer would be no. And now I can say yes. And I would never look back. And even though it's never been an easy journey, I don't think any entrepreneur or business owner can say it's been easy. They can say maybe it's been challenging and fruitful, and they learned a lot. And I have learned a lot. And it's been an amazing journey. So that was back in 2018 that I left the corporate world. So about nearly 10 years now.
So what was the business you started, and how did you reinvent yourself out there as an entrepreneur? How did you get it off the ground? How did you conceptualize it and find some clients?
Well, it was very organic. I didn't have a clear vision of what I wanted my business to be. I just knew I had some skills, and I had made a living helping other people to achieve results. And that's all I really knew how to do. Is you gave me a task, I'd get it done. In a sense, let's be fair, I was a worker bee, even though a senior level worker bee. That's, what it's like in the corporate. I didn't know anything about sales or say, marketing a brand or brand positioning. No, personal brand, zero. I didn't know who I was going to help or how, but I was convinced that there was something in me which thought, I can do this. I can figure it out along the way. Having an amazing wife and partner was critical, because I don't think I could have done it without that support, to be able to say, you know what, you can do this. You can operate outside of a corporate environment. You can find clients, make money, not rely on that one steady paycheck, which these days isn't even that steady with the risks associated. You really have just one client. If you lose your job, that's it. You need to find another. I did courses and training. I did a really transformational 2-year business course called Agi Network, which is based in San Jose, California. And it was the only one from really abroad. It was like a business philosophy course that opened up my eyes and was really transformational in the way I perceived life, business for sure, but also myself, because I was so conditioned to think in a certain way, maybe in a small-minded box. Throughout my career, it was almost like taking the blue pill, from the Matrix, and opening up that curtain and seeing, hold on, what I thought I knew to be true was only my interpretation of life. Actually, there's infinite possibilities of what can be. And the barrier to achieving those possibilities is really just your thinking and your ability to just have those thoughts. So I think that was like the number one thing I started to work on, was just to unlearn a lot of what I learned in school and at work and through other people and hanging around in non-entrepreneurial environments for so long. I had like 40 years of scarcity mindset and conditioning, and I didn't believe in myself. And there's just no place for that in entrepreneurship. It doesn't serve, right? And so we have to constantly check back in to our thoughts all the time and make sure that they're conducive to the outcomes that they want. So that's the first big transformational learning I went through, and I paid a lot of money for this strategic knowledge and to get my head, shift that mindset around, and it was worth every penny. And that's also what made me learn to spend more, actually, and to not be afraid to invest in myself, and to know that actually when you're spending money on personal development or training or learning, actually that's really one of the best investments you can make.
That's a very interesting perspective. It actually took a program for a reinvention, a really serious reinvention for you. Francis, what was the business you started? And is it the same business you're running now?
Yeah, the business I started, it started as customers for plumbers, but it really was Lead Hero, because that's what we did. We just picked a niche. It was me, and I forced Carolina to come and help. Carolina also had a great corporate job, but we both felt we were a bit mismatched. And so she came to help me out in the business. That's my wife, Francis and Carolina. And we picked a niche because our mentors say, pick a niche. Doesn't matter what niche. You just need to get started. We picked a niche that was starving for what we do. They need leads. They need to convert more leads into money. And that's what we did. And we started to use high level and automation, and we built campaigns and we run ads, and we got clients the hard way. And we built a pretty healthy number of plumbers and boiler installers and trades in the UK. What we really missed was more strategic custom projects and deeper relationships as well. And so we have those clients as well, but we also have more strategic marketing campaigns, as we do for larger businesses and or SaaS businesses like BookMagic.
You work for Book Magic, and you and Carolina do a fantastic job. And your business is called Lead Hero, which is a great name for the business. But you also wrote the book as well, Francis.
Yeah, the book Leads Machine, the 9-step system to generate predictable, consistent sales and scale your service business, courtesy of Rethink Press.
Absolutely, very, very connected here. But in terms of reinvention, I always think that writing your first book is a reinvention. Becoming an author is a kind of reinvention process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done a few transformational programs in my life. KPI with Daniel Priestley was one of them. I did that as well. I'll always be learning. I'll always be investing into the next method to learn a new skill. And I think it was on that program that the opportunity to write a book just was floated. And I would have never thought about myself as an author if it weren't for the KPI program and Daniel Priestley. Just thinking about it, because it's all, like I said before, it's all about what you think. It's all about your belief. And if you don't have that thought, then it doesn't happen. But you have to have that thought in order for a certain reality to manifest. And it also taught me that people are capable of so much more than they think, because we have endless possibilities for what we can be and what we can do. We all have something to offer, and mine was actually putting a lot of our marketing strategies and a methodology into the book Leads Machine. And so that's one of the big transformations that helped me, become who I am today.
You've had so many very interesting roles, transformations, places that you've worked, and sort of developmental processes. It's fascinating and very interesting that you've come to land for the moment in entrepreneurship and creating leads in brilliant ways for other people. So Francis, final question. If there's somebody out there who's looking, maybe trapped in a corporate job or seeing the end of a corporate job and thinking, maybe should I get into entrepreneurship, or just looking at change in the future, what would be one piece of advice you would give them based on your many reinventions?
Right. Well, I'd like to say that we should question. This might sound a little bit woohoo, but we should question our environment and our perception of reality a little bit more, and what you believe to be, say, a truth, right? And if you're experiencing some kind of nagging disturbance, maybe a stress or something isn't quite right, it probably isn't, right? And we tend to leave that for much longer than we should. I know I did. Like when I was in corporate, I felt that something wasn't quite right. And for me, it was getting a little bit older, feeling less appreciated in the jobs that I had, feeling I was working and delivering value, but maybe not recognized in the way I thought I deserved. That's all selfish reasons, but it also made me feel misplaced, right? And I would say that actually, if you do feel that way, there's probably a reason. And you start looking around and asking the questions and looking for, I would say, like in The Wizard of Oz, they pull back the curtain a little bit. And if you start pulling back the curtain to see, well, what's going on in the world? Is it job disruption? Is there less opportunities there? Do you have to create more opportunities? Is it a side hustle opportunity? Do you need to learn something new to keep yourself more relevant in the marketplace? I think the worst thing is to be complacent and just drift with the marketplace and just let it take you wherever it wants, because it might not take you to a place where you want to end up. And, start to actually put the rudders in and drive that little boat towards where you want. And you can do that now. There's so many resources out there, free and paid for, just to kind of peel back the curtain and look at skills and tech and what are going to be the new jobs of the tomorrow and what those opportunities are. So that's what I would recommend.
That's a fantastic piece of advice. I love that. That's very, very deep and thoughtful. Francis, thank you very much for this Phoenix conversation. It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks all of you for listening in.
Thank you, Francis Rodino, for telling us your reinvention journey from your international childhood onwards and sharing your thoughts about the dangers and values of new technology, as well as about corporate life and entrepreneurship. For more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on most social media platforms as long as you can spell my name. I am the only Lucy McCarraher. It looks like Lucy McCarraher on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.